What is up, everyone? Shan's here, and I'm so excited to bring you another video today. And today I'm going to be talking about God's original design for gender. This is a topic that I see a lot of people talking about, and specifically, they like to bring up male headship or the patriarchy or the hierarchy. And I just want to talk about whether or not that was in God's original design for male and female. We're going to be going through a lot of the things that I've researched and learned come from the Bible versus Biblical Womanhood, the book. It's by Philip Payne. I will put a link in the description box to that book if you're interested in learning more. I haven't decided if I'm going to make this an entire series going through the book, but I do think that he makes a lot of really interesting and valid points that need to be discussed in a wider audience. And a lot of people avoid talking about gender and gender hierarchy because they're scared that their particular opinion will be rejected, especially if they're people who are speaking of a more equality-focused gender. I don't want to say hierarchy, but if they're thinking of gender as more of an equality focused relationship in terms of God's original design, I think a lot of people get hesitant to want to come forward with that type of opinion because the church has so very clearly for years put out this narrative that God intended male headship. So I just want to talk about that. Let's look at what the Bible says and get into it a little bit more. So first, we're going to be going through, in order to kind of break it down, I think the best way to go through it, at least in this first video, is to go through the creation account, which is Genesis 1 through 3. If you see me looking down, it's because I have my computer here that has my notes on it, so I don't completely lose track. But we're going to start in Genesis 1, and specifically in 1:26 through 31. I'm reading it in the NIV version, and I'm going to go ahead and actually read it so that we can get an understanding of what the biblical text actually says. So, starting at verse 26, then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and all the beasts of the earth and all the birds in the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground. Everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. Okay. So what we see in this passage is when God is giving mankind dominion over the earth, you can see specifically that God gave both male and female the same dominion over the earth. Everywhere in this passage, it's God created them. God told them to be fruitful and multiply. God is giving man and woman the same exact instructions. So that's important to note because Genesis 1 doesn't assign gender hierarchy. It doesn't assign different roles for male and female. It affirms equal rights and responsibilities for man and woman. That's what it does. It affirms the first creation of male and female, man and woman, and how God intended for that relationship to look. And that relationship was to rule together. Now, Genesis 2. Let's look at Genesis 2. 2:18. The Lord said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now, this is where a lot of people think that they get caught up on the word helper. And they think helper means the male is the lead and the woman is the helper. So let's dig into what that word actually means. Helper it's not a servant, it's not an assistant, it's a friend or a partner. And in order to look at that, we can look at the Hebrew text. So helper, suitable for him, the entire phrase in the Hebrew text is ezer kenegdo. I apologize if I say these Hebrew words incorrectly. Do the best I can. But the best way or the best translation for that is saving strength corresponding to him. Ezer kenegdo, a saving strength corresponding to him. So ezer is often translated as helper. And in the Bible, it's never used to mean helper in a servant form. But instead, it's a person who's able to do something that someone else is not capable of doing. Okay? So in this case, with man and woman is capable of giving birth and man is not. So that is the ezer, the helper that woman is able to be to man. And in fact, ezer is used 19 other times in the Bible. 16 of those times, it's used to reference God. 16 of those times. We know that God is not subservient to anyone. So the use of the term ezer shows us that ezer is not a subservient term. The other 3 times that it's used in the Bible, it's a military help or a rescue or some kind of deliverance. So we have 19 times that that's used in the Bible, and it's meaning somebody who's a helper, a rescuer, a deliverance, or God himself. So we know that if every other time the Bible, ezer, is used to mean those things, we can't pinpoint or just pick out the one time and decide, oh, when we talk about woman, that means helper in a subservient way. That's not the case with the Bible. That was not God's intention. God's intention was for woman to offer to man something that man couldn't do on his own, to be a companion, to be a helper, to be at his side. Woman was made from man's rib in order to stand at his side, not from his head in order to be above him or from his feet to be below him, but from his rib to stand at his side. That was God's original intention. Okay, so let's see. Now, let's talk about Genesis 3, because that's where everything changes, and that's where we really need to figure out, okay, wait, what happens here? In this situation, we know the story. The serpent comes to Eve. Did God really say that you shouldn't eat from the tree? She eats from the tree. She gives some to Adam. They both eat. They now have knowledge of good and evil. They understand and realize that they're naked. God questions them. After God questions them and finds out what happened, he tells man and woman specific consequences that they're going to have to deal with as a result of the fall. So in Genesis 3:16, God says to woman, "Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." Now, some people think that that means like, a sexual desire. No, that's not the case, because the same exact phrasing, "your desire will be for your husband," that same phrasing is used again in Genesis 4:7 when we're talking about Cain and Abel and sin. And again, desire is used. And desire in these mirroring sections, you can see that desire is meant to mean control. So that phrase means your desire will be to control your husband and he will rule over you. That is a consequence of the sin. Okay? That is not the original design that God had. It is a consequence of the fall. So what God is saying here is, as a result of the fall, the serpent has to slither on the ground. The woman desires for her husband, desires to control her husband, and he will rule over her. And then man will have to work hard in order to produce stuff from the ground. You know what? I need to pull it up because I don't want to say just like stuff from the ground, but you know what I mean. Let's look it up. Let's pull it up. Okay. So it says, for the consequence for the serpent, cursed are you above all livestock. To the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, or your desire will be to control your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and dust you will return. So these are consequences of the fall. Now, what I want to point out for people is a lot of times we look at everything else in those verses that God commands man and woman, or that God says to man and woman as a result of the fall. And we look at, okay, so God says you're going to have pain in child rearing. So what have we done as humans? A lot of times humans are trying to learn how to pray and play worship music, have biblical births, commune with God during birth, or a lot of people are meditating during birth, or having medication during birth. Mankind is doing things to try to overcome that consequence of the fall, pain of childbirth. What about men when it comes to getting produce from the ground? Men are attempting to overcome that situation. So we've created a lot of different ways that people get food now. Now, most of the time, men just go to the grocery store to get the food. Okay. They are sweating and working hard in different areas of work now in order to provide for the family. But it's not sweating from your brow and thistles and thorns, and you're out there personally getting the food from the ground, unless you're a farmer. So men have tried to, or worked to, overcome the consequence of the fall, of that consequence of the fall. But then we get to women are to desire your husband and he will rule over you. And the church has kind of just taken that one and said, yep, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what God wanted. Okay, that's a consequence of the fall. And we should be working to get past that the same way that we work to get past the other consequences of the fall. We should be working to get back to God's original design, which is equality. And that doesn't mean that I'm saying women don't listen to your husbands. What I'm saying is our consequences that we desire as women, we desire to control our husband. So we have to try to stop that, crucify that. Don't desire to control your husband. That's a consequence of the fall. We need to reel it in, try our best not to control our husbands, try to let them go ahead and lead. And listen, he will rule over you. That, men, don't try to rule over us in this commanding dominion type of sense, but instead try to overcome that. Try to, from your part, give us equality in decision making. Women, try not to control your husband. That is the way that we try to overcome that consequence of the fall. Some common objections to this viewpoint is, Adam named Eve, so he had authority over her. No. God gave Adam the honor to name Eve, and he named her woman. So he took Ish, I think it's Ish is man, Isha is woman. He just put a feminine ending on it, and he named her woman. It doesn't necessarily mean that man had dominion over woman or authority over woman. It means that God gave man the honor of naming woman. Okay, another objection. Adam was created first, so he's the leader. Order of creation does not equal rank or hierarchy. And in fact, if that were the case, I'm pretty sure animals were made before humans. So does that mean animals should have a higher place or hierarchy over man? No. And aside from that, God, throughout the Bible, actually does the opposite of the this person was created or born first, so they deserve the blessing. We know that because Ishmael was born before Isaac, but Isaac was the one who was blessed. David is the youngest out of his brothers, but he was the one made king. There's just a lot of Joseph was the youngest out of his brothers, but he was the one who was elevated. So there's a lot of different instances where the youngest is actually the one, or the one who was born after was the one who got elevated. So God's not looking at, oh, you were made first, you were made second. God's looking at who he can use for a specific purpose. Now, I know that a lot of people get into the teachings of Paul's letters in particular when they talk about the male hierarchy, and that is a whole nother conversation. We have a lot of things that we need to get through before we can even get to that conversation, but if I do end up making this into a series, I'll be sure to address that. But the moral of the story is that God's original creation was equality, not hierarchy. We don't want to build an entire doctrine on the fall, on the consequences of the fall. We want to build it on creation, on what God made. God's original intent was partnership. God's original intent was equality, for man and woman to rule together. God gave us mutual blessings, and that's what his original design was for us. And what we did is, when we had a consequence of the sin, we got our consequences, and then people kind of said, well, this one, women are going to work to not have so much pain in childbirth. Men are going to work to not have so much pain in providing for families. And this one about the woman's going to desire for her husband and he'll rule over her, we'll keep that one. No, that's a consequence of the fall, and we should be striving to also try to get back to God's original design. So I hope that this was helpful or interesting, or at least sparked some questions in your mind to question some of the other verses that maybe you have interpreted to mean a particular way in the Bible. If I end up doing an entire series on this, we can walk through all of Philip Payne's book, but it's a fantastic resource, very biblical, where he walks through what the Bible says in terms of biblical womanhood, what the church has taught us for so many years. So I hope that you're open to it. Listen, I know that a lot of people will not be open to it. And there's a fear of talking about this topic for fear of being rejected. Just like I said at the beginning, there was also a fear of people talking about slavery not being condoned in the Bible. And people didn't want to talk about that for fear of being rejected because it was so accepted in that time and in the church at the time that people didn't want to speak about it. That's kind of the same, like the male hierarchy is also so very accepted within the church that people are scared to talk about what the reality is or what the original design was. And we'll see a lot of examples throughout the Bible of when God elevates women and uses women in amazing ways and really shows how much he loves and values women. So if you like this video, just go ahead and like it, subscribe, give me some encouragement, leave a comment, whatever you would like to do to support the channel. And thank you so much for watching.